Hello, today I want to talk about the movie War of the Worlds 2025. First, I should mention that I haven't read the original novels or seen any previous film adaptations. This was my first experience with the War of the Worlds universe. Before writing this review, I looked at international YouTube reactions. The film received heavy criticism, with some even calling it one of the worst films in history. Yet, despite this, I actually enjoyed certain parts of it. Plot. So, what's the plot? The main character spends most of his time at his computer, observing online as our side battles the other side. He merely observes the war online. It is very interesting how the directors of the film managed to play out the situation of the invasion of our world. Usually in such films we have some action from the main character, some dynamics, that the main character run somewhere, do something. But here the situation is shown of how an ordinary person perceives distant events. Modern people experience war by sitting at their computers at home and working remotely. And war manifests in everyday life as power outages, sirens, curfews, food supply disruptions, or attacks on relatives. But basically, an ordinary person will watch the war through the monitor screen. In general, there are two plot lines. The main character is both a very important person in the security service and a father to two children. He is an FBI agent engaged in global surveillance. That is, he finds out where people live, what they buy, how they spend money, where they go, and can even connect to any camera. And on the other hand, he is a father, and he tries to control his daughter and son, believing that they live incorrectly and trying to set them on the right path. And you know what the most interesting thing is? I actually understand this film much better than many other works of art. After all, I also spend around 16 hours a day at the computer, and all my communication with friends and relatives is via the internet, like this person. And if you take Alexandre Dumas, the Count of Monte Cristo, then I can't even understand those people. Their family was organized differently, they communicated differently, they had different social relationships. For example, I'm sure this father of the family rarely has family dinners, although all their problems could be solved in a quiet family circle. But here are other people who live in a full online life. The second storyline tells about the work of the main character and the invasion of aliens. The aliens first of all achieved the effect of surprise. They turned off our satellites, surveillance systems, and so we missed their attack. Then people gathered, regrouped, united, created a single command of all human armies, began to strike back and push back the aliens. Then the aliens struck back at our databases and internet infrastructure, which results in disorganization of troop command. This is done very effectively. Why? Let me explain. Modern warfare, as I see it, is very dependent on communications and satellite technology. That is, you can watch the fighting online, see planes flying or missiles being launched. If all communication systems suddenly turn off, this will be a powerful blow. I think that after that, the enemy will begin to crumble. Moreover, in a war against the tripods, one would expect people to rely heavily on missiles. However, if satellites and communication systems are down, guiding missiles would be extremely difficult. The result of this confrontation disappointed me a little. Our hackers launched a virus into all the databases, and then the Alliance absorbed these databases along with the virus, became infected with the virus themselves, and all collapsed simultaneously. This struck me as somewhat unrealistic. Why? First, the tripods are portrayed as extremely effective in combat, yet they could easily be destroyed with a grenade launcher. Second, perhaps if there were 1000 times more tripods, then we would simply be taken by numbers. Why are there so few tripods? Third, the tripods had no antivirus protection. In reality, antivirus systems would likely filter out the infected data. Fourth, when the Alliance communication system went down, the tripods themselves should have had some additional commands, for example, primary targets, secondary targets. That is, tripods should know what to do in emergency situations. I see some small disadvantages in the war with aliens. A common criticism is that the security specialist can hack almost anything. But if he is head of department responsible for surveillance, this seems plausible. If you work in the field of information security, then you essentially have access to everything, that you are protection to all databases. If the people around you ignore rules and basic digital hygiene, then what happens in the movie is, in fact, reality. In addition, there are a huge number of cameras installed in the world. Then we have a lot of correspondence in different messengers and by email. We shop online. There is data with our accounts. If such data exists, it inevitably accumulates in centralized systems. And if it accumulates somewhere, then someone will access it and use this data accordingly. I do not mean that everything that the main character does is entirely possible. One of the complaints about this film was that after these aliens downloaded their data, chaos ensued because the entire internet infrastructure crashed. For example, people lost their savings because financial data was destroyed. How, in my opinion, the financial system works? For example, I have money on my card, and this money is in the bank. And there is a certain server that is a computer on which some tables are stored, like an Excel table. Not Excel, something like an Excel table. And these tables record that I have some money in my account. If an alien civilization strikes this entire infrastructure at the same time and, say, destroys all these financial records, then that's it, I will be left a beggar. This also applies to records of a medical or educational nature, because this has happened, for example, that there is a library of scientific articles, then some unpleasant things happens and it's all. I can no longer access the articles. This site can be found through Google, but the articles themselves disappear and there is no longer access to them. So, a specific robot comes to the servers, say Facebook, downloads all the information from there, deletes it, and we no longer have this information. If you strike at data centers, the world may collapse. This is especially dangerous when people do not have cash and all savings are stored only on cards. Just from these cards all data will disappear, and everyone will become poor, everyone will lose their savings. Maybe I'm wrong, of course, but who knows? Another common criticism is that the main character edited the video too quickly. But you know, I edit videos on YouTube myself, and here's what I realized. He opened a video editing program, threw in the voice recording, then added photos and PDFs to confirm his words. What happened next? Editing such a video wouldn't take long. I could open a program like Filmora, add the audio, insert 20 or 30 images or PDFs and set them to slide mode. All in about 20 minutes. But the film couldn't show him sitting and editing a video for 20 minutes. The film is also criticized for the fact that the father was quickly convinced by the data sent by his son. But in reality, if you are an expert, you will immediately recognize a fake. It is very difficult to forge a document in such a way as to deceive you. For example, I watched the analysis of the Veles book by philologist Svetlana Burlak, and as she said, a specialist opens the Veles book, looks at it for 5 seconds and closes it because there is nothing more to discuss. Everything is clear to him. For example, how can this happen to me? I understand the history of the Soviet Union of the 40s and 50s, more or less. And if they give me, for example, some archival document of the party organs of the Soviet organs, I will open it, look at it for a minute, and will be able to make some conclusion about this document. If it is fake, I will figure it out right away. It is exactly the same here. He opened the document that his son provided him, looked, listened to the audio and said, yes, this makes sense. So, within the framework of the entire picture of the world that he has, his son's evidence makes sense. It's like, for example, with the fact that it turns out that the USA government was spying on its population through Facebook, something that Edward Snowden revealed to the world. Before Edward Snowden, such theories about government surveillance were considered mere conspiracy theories, but then Edward Snowden revealed the truth of the world. A specialist examining Snowden's files would quickly realize the truth of and that everything was so. The same situation happened here, which is also well known and understandable to me. Another complaint is that the son is a super hacker, the daughter is a super biologist, and the father is a top-level security expert. Yes, this is a complaint, but you know what? I'll tell you something in a little different. A film is a film, and some script liberties are allowed in it. Another point about the film is that the main character constantly mixes work and personal life, and he sends personal emails on his top secret computer. On the one hand, this is a violation of security rules, but on the other hand, I heard that some journalist who was not supposed to be there, was added to the presidential chat in the USA, who read the chat and later leaked information from it. Can you imagine? Or that Hillary Clinton was accused of allegedly using her work email for personal correspondence. So you have a work phone and you understand that you should not write personal messages from this work phone. But on the other hand, who cares? A personal message through work messengers. Will he sell out the country? So a little relaxation is quite possible, especially if the security is not monitored very much. Who cares, especially if I am the boss, just who comes to me and tells me something. Characters. The main idea of the film is that the father was too controlling and did not give enough warmth to his daughter and son, and then having gone through some trials and almost sacrificing himself, he began to pay more attention to his family and build not a dictatorial relationship, but more friendly relations on equal terms. The important thing is that the father has changed internally. So, at the beginning of the film, he tries to control his son, and he even deletes the game from his son's computer. And by the end he accepts his son's point of view and agrees with him. If at the beginning of the film he tries to control his daughter, telling her to eat more protein, it is good for the baby, then at the end of the movie he already apologizes to her, listens to her, makes contact with her and establishes a warm and trusting relationship. Regarding how he treats his son, deleting his computer game and disregarding his opinion, you see this is a natural reaction. As far as I understand, the main character has just spent $200,000 on his son's education, yet his son neither works nor studies. He just spends time playing online games. Should this please the main character? And he understands that he has no leverage over his son. The son will keep wasting his time on the computer and this can last forever. So he tries to take at least some measures given his limited capabilities. You can hang out in online games endlessly, scoring thousands of hours in the same Dota 2. And what should your parents do, for example, who invested resources and time in you? What should parents think about this, that their son is wasting his life in vain? Speaking about the main character being a bit emotionless, that he just sits in front of the computer and looks at the monitor. Imagine a camera watching you at your desk. How often do you laugh? How often do you cry? How often do you show emotions in private? So does the security guard. He sits at the computer and reacts like some conclusions from them. Yes, another tragedy. For example, I open, say, the internet and look. The Indo-Pakistani conflict. So many more people dead. So many missiles fell on Pakistan and Indian soil. Another tragedy in this unfair world. Locations. The sets, backgrounds and environments are very well shot. They may not be top tier, but they are far from terrible. You know, every movie has decent graphics these days, but if you take, for example, the 1979 movie Alien by Ridley Scott, that movie has aged poorly. Some of the special effects are outdated there, but here the graphics are just okay. Many criticized the design of the tripods. After all, no one has ever seen a giant iron tripod in reality, so its design can be interpreted freely. How is it supposed to work? I don't know what it is supposed to look like. To me, it looks believable. Topics. This movie raises an important question. What is more important, freedom or security? Particularly, freedom of the internet versus digital security. Security in what sense? There are a huge number of different sites on the internet. Some gambling sites where you can fall into scammers' traps. You just open a phishing link and your data is at risk. But on the other hand, if you make the internet completely safe and controlled, then the government or scammers will get data to our financial accounts, our medicine, our education, our work, personal data, anything. Let's approach this question from another perspective, the concept of space. Space is literally the place where we live. There are different types: public space, private space, transit and abandoned space. This is if we talk about urban space. On the other hand, there is, say, a rural space or, for example, nature, a space that we do not use. For example, once there was a building there and now there is a vacant lot. What does this film have to do with it? The internet is gradually becoming the same space. Judge yourself. You can shop there, work, study, have fun, communicate, love, maintain relationships and start a family. Except that you cannot have children there yet. For this, a man and a woman still need to meet in person. Therefore, the internet cannot be unregulated. Indeed, the early 2000s were marked by chaos online, but gradually the internet shifted from chaos to order. I compare it to a complex infrastructure, for example of a large developed city. There must be traffic rules. The internet has gradually become more organized, preventing uncontrolled content dumps. So there was no such thing as if some philosopher sat and said, "There is too much freedom on the internet, we need to make it safe." And after that, states gradually began to come to the internet, and the government took this chaos and gradually turned it into space, creating rules, control, and literally physically acting against people who behave incorrectly on the internet, receiving restrictions accordingly. Other topics are family relationships. The problem of a modern family is shown when people do not live together, but are at a distance from each other. In the 19th century and earlier, a traditional family had a man as a head, a woman subordinate to him, and children with defined household responsibilities. In contrast, a modern nuclear family consists of parents and a child, with each member largely independent. Another important topic is trust in information and digital addiction. Can you trust the government with your information for your safety or not? Next, the topic of Amazon advertising. You know, I listened to some reviews and they all criticize that Amazon advertises its brand in their film. What's wrong with that? If I understand correctly, the budget is about 65 million, but I don't know for sure whether advertising costs are included or not. In general, producing a film is an expensive thing, and when you produce a film, you need to justify these costs, because you can't tell the director, the scriptwriters, the actors, the entire production team that from now on we will feed on the Holy Spirit. Making a film requires funding, so producers naturally attract sponsors, and as I understand, a significant part came from Amazon. As a result, the film features Amazon naturally, as part of fulfilling sponsorship obligations, and it looks quite natural. For example, the main character says in the film, "I don't want to keep track of what people buy on Amazon." But people make purchases on Amazon, right? So he mentioned Amazon, but he could have said something else. It seemed quite natural to me. Then comes the delivery of the flash drive, again via Amazon, well-integrated advertising within the story. This is not because capitalists are bad or creators sell themselves for money. It is simply a question of how you will earn money, how you will recoup your expenses. Conclusion. Generally speaking, the film certainly has its flaws. The confrontation with aliens is shown a bit unrealistically. But if we talk about an alien invasion, then Ridley Scott showed a realistic scene. David's ship flew to the planet Eden, dropped biological weapons, and the entire population died in horrific agony, without any way for them to understand why. David has motives that this traditional civilization cannot understand. This is one of the possible ways of interaction, although much more likely is the way suggested by astronomer Vladimir Surdin, that a ship with data will arrive to us and we will not interact with other civilizations in any way. But I doubt that in the event of a full-fledged alien invasion, we will be able to defeat anyone. Therefore, I will not analyze how humanity was able to defeat a super-intelligent civilization. Humanity would not be able to defeat a galactic civilization, but let's make some small assumptions. Some criticize the graphics and locations, but I found them adequate and believable. I also don't think the actors are acting badly. They act like normal people. The key idea of the film is that the main character realizes that the value of family and changes in a profound way. This film reflects the reality of our times and to a large extent my own reality. So with all its shortcomings, I understand that I live about the same as this person. Of course, my family, job and daily habits differ, but using the internet as my primary means of communication closely mirrors my own reality. Therefore, I would rate the film around 6 out of 10. Thank you for your attention.